So we have this guy that predicted BFA a few months before release back in 2017. Not a big deal, leaks happen, we've seen it all the time throughout World of Warcraft history. However, at the same time, in 2017 as well, he predicted Shadowlands coming after BFA, and after Shadowlands, this guy predicted a Dragon expansion. Not only that, but he knew that the Elemental and a Dragon storyline will be happening as well, which is going on as we speak. Now, what is most interesting is that he also predicted a Shah, meaning Y'Shaarj expansion with the Void Lords in the background coming next. With the recent Y'Shaarj in the Void hints, he might be right on the money once again, meaning this could very likely be the expansion that will be announced this year. Best of all, he reveals some of his sources, the thought process. So how exactly did this guy manage to figure it all out? Who really is he, and are we going to be seeing a Y'Shaarj Void expansion after Dragonflight? So before we get into the video, I want to show you guys the Bridge Wallet. As we know, I've been using it for over a few years, and I've been also using the key case as well for a few months, which fits perfectly. Now, the Bridge Wallet is like the perfect minimalist, like the super cool but really sleek wallet. You can fit up to 12 cards, there's cash on the side, and really it is just amazing. There's over 30 designs with burnt titanium and carbon fiber. So make sure to use my code Doron to get a 10% discount, and check out my link in the description below. This was one of those MMO champion leaks. I really wouldn't even bother making a video because, you know, that is just random people making their own wish list, just random fan concepts. However, with this one, I gotta say, there is just so much more than just this being a simple coincidence. So to add some context, this is a Chinese player that posted on a Chinese forum back in 2017, only a few months before BFA was announced, and he predicted that the expansion will be about the old gods, which obviously ended up being true, and Result was the final boss of BFA. With this, you know, you would say this is pretty lucky, but not impossible. I mean, we predicted Dragonflight months before it was announced. I mean, you can find my own videos on my channel talking about the Dragon expansion 6 months earlier. In the case of Dragonflight, the main evidence was Blizzard reusing some assets, some store mounts, there was some data mine stuff. In the case of this guy predicting BFA, it was definitely possible he knew someone leaked it to him, or there was some sort of contact at Blizzard. My personal thoughts are that since it's on a Chinese forum, maybe Blizzard couldn't do much about figuring out the leak, which is why it is out so in the open. However, this guy literally went insane that you would think this is probably like some sort of a fortune teller. So in that 2017 thread, he predicted that the expansion after BFA will be Shadowlands, and that the expansion after Shadowlands will be Dragonflight. Keep in mind that this was 6 years ago, all the way back during Legion, so I gotta say it's just insane that he managed to predict so much. Now, also keep in mind the guy didn't say the names of the expansions, but he figured out the themes of them, which is pretty much the same. For BFA, he said that the expansion will be about an old god storyline, and for Shadowlands, he said that it will be related to the Lich King and that we will be going into the Shadowlands. He didn't say the name of the expansion being this, but that we would go into the realm of the Shadowlands. Keep in mind, we have known about the Shadowlands since World of Warcraft started. We knew it was a place, we just didn't really know anything about it or what was really going on inside, and maybe it was better if it stayed that way. However, this guy also predicted a Dragon expansion, which I gotta say, at that point in time is really just next to impossible. I mean, Blizzard usually has one expansion always in the works, but this is essentially 2 down the line, if not 3. Interestingly enough, he actually revealed his thought process on this, and this actually makes quite a lot of sense when you see it written down. Personally, I would say this is entirely possible. If you guys have been following the recent Blizzard interviews, they have clearly stated that they have a pretty long-term plan and that they already have multiple expansions in the works, or at least in the idea stage. They're not just really figuring out, let's do this next, let's do that. So it's likely they probably have like a 10-year-old plan, and this guy probably managed to get a hold of it. Also, might have noticed them talking about how Shadowlands was the ending of an era of WoW, which, while it sounded super ridiculous at the time, downright insulting, this might actually make more sense with this leak. So essentially what this guy had figured out is that Blizzard's master plan is in essence rehashing old expansions or using the same themes just in a different package. From a business perspective, this obviously makes a lot of sense as these expansions were wildly successful back in the day, so no wonder they want to use elements of it. So the idea goes like this. He essentially split two main storylines of expansions, and from them, Blizzard is making new ones. So we have TBC lore, and from this we got the Draenor Orc storyline that ended up being Worlds of Draenor. The second line was the Burning Legion line, which was a thing in TBC, and that ended up in Legion. Then the next expansion after TBC, so a new one, was Wrath of the Lich King, and it also had two lines. One was the Old God storyline, which was a thing with Yoxron, and the second was the Scourge the Lich King line. Well, Blizzard obviously used this right after Legion. They made an Old God expansion with BFA, and then followed up with the Lich King expansion and the Shadowlands. Literally, the start of Shadowlands was the destruction of the Helm of Domination, so obviously Lich King related. Now, what comes next is super interesting, and I think something that we can really predict from right now, and that we can possibly use for the future as well. So, his idea was that they started rehashing Cataclysm. In Cataclysm, we really had the Dragon storyline and the Elemental Lord storyline, although, personally, I would also add the Old God teams were pretty significant as well. Well, naturally, Blizzard followed this pattern and created a Dragon expansion. What I think is really interesting is that we can now look back on this and the statement that Blizzard made at the end of Shadowlands, and it just makes so much more sense. It's like just mind-blown thing. Do you remember how Blizzard said that they finished the storyline of Warcraft 3? If you look at this pattern that this guy had figured out, they were actually right. The Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King really was just an extension of Warcraft 3. We had Illidan, Kel'Thas, Arthas, Lich King. By extension, there was also the Burning Legion that was the main thing in Warcraft 3. By the end of Shadowlands, all that stuff was really figured out. Illidan and Kel'Thas are gone, Burning Legion is gone, now we got the ending of Arthas as well. So the next Cataclysm line may be slightly related to Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2 due to Deathwing, but he never really had that major of a role. But I would say most of this Cataclysm storyline from this point forward, including Mists of Pandaria, is original World of Warcraft lore, not a continuation of Warcraft 3, so this could definitely be considered a new era of the Warcraft storyline. So the guy figured out that 10.0 is going to be about the Dragon storyline, then the next expansion, 11.0, is going to be about the Elemental Lords, the next one is going to be an extension of Mists of Pandaria, so the Horde and the Alliance War, and the Shah and the Yashiraj storyline. However, I would say some things have definitely changed since this point. I gotta say, this guy really managed to insanely predict this entire thought process. I think it might be possible that Blizzard really did make this type of a long-term plan back in 2017 and someone leaked it. However, obviously, things have really changed at Blizzard since 2017. If you guys noticed, like half the team is no longer working there, they got completely different story guys, they really just changed up the entire ship. Furthermore, we have new Dragonflight hints that I think also go in line with his old prediction, but I don't really think it will be happening in the same pace as he originally wrote it out back in the day. With the current setup, it is entirely possible that the next expansion could involve Elemental Lords, but I feel like Blizzard might skip that step. We already have the Elemental and the Dragon storyline in Dragonflight, so it was really combined in this one expansion. Even more importantly, I really think we can scrap the Horde and the Alliance War coming in 12.0, because Blizzard just united the factions. They literally told us in a relatively recent interview that we will never get a global conflict like BFA again, which I don't think they originally planned to do, but they really did this more as a measure to keep the game playable with a smaller player base, because there was a lot of issues with some of the populations. However, I definitely do think he had a significant point with the Shah line, and we also have a bunch of Yashiraj and hints and void hints, and I could totally see this 13.0 that he predicted being as soon as 11.0, which we could see announced this year. So first of all, right now we got a bunch of void hints. We got a Shadow returning from the Umbral, the Void Veil. We have the 10.1 ending with this pool of energy, 7 candles relating to Yashiraj. We got a bunch of Xelatat hints. We got Yoxron and Azot hints, and that time travel to the Black Empire. We know Old Gods corrupted Galakrond. We know Galakrond is officially returning, so there is just an insane amount of Old God hints all over the place. Furthermore, we kinda learned that Old Gods can't really die in the conventional sense of the word, which is why we may be dealing with N'Zoth once again, despite obviously having defeated him back in BFA. So by this logic, why would Yashiraj, the strongest of the Old Gods, have been just defeated and just gone for good? His heart made a serious mess, and the entire Shah storyline was arguably the main focal point of Mists of Pandaria. So if we are now finishing up the Cataclysm era with Dragonflight and going into the Mists of Pandaria era, we may be skipping the Horde and the Alliance War this guy talked about and just going right into the Old God Shah stuff. Keep in mind, he didn't just give us his thought process, he also gave us some more hints. He predicted that from BFA to 12.0, the Void Lords will be the main villains behind all the chaos kinda in the background, which by the current stuff going around, I can't really say this is impossible, and he was probably right. We have that big what is to come and a lot of Cosmic Void, Void Lord hints, so he may have been right on that as well. Of course, this was just a forum thread by some called the God thread, but I don't know, seeing that the guy literally saw 3 expansions coming, I mean, he predicted all 3 expansions, I really think he may be onto something, and with the current information, something with the Void and Elemental Lords definitely seems like the most likely option happening right after Dragonflight, as everything is being set up towards that at the moment. Thank you for watching. Check out the 6 Dragon Knight mount, the Nether Drake being added by clicking on the screen, and check out the Academy for videos on real world history. See you next time.